So joining me now to talk about how Congress gets out of this mess, Hawaii Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Also with me is Illinois Republican Congressman Aaron Schock. They are co-chairs of something that they call the Congressional Future Caucus. And considering the mess that Washington is in, the idea that there's a future right now for Congress sometimes will make some of us laugh. But anyway, Congressman, thank you for joining. Congressman, since you have you're playing the away game here, you're on satellite. Let me start with you. First on this deal, are you pretty much going to accept at this point whatever Senate compromise comes over to the House?
Well, I don't know if I would say anything that the Senate sends over. I mean, this has been going on for far too long, and, you know, this is deal number 22, back and forth. The House, the Senate says they have deals. The House hasn't been able to produce anything. The Senate has yet to be able to produce anything. So I'm going to reserve any final judgment till I see the devil that are in the details. But I think, to your point about the political center, and quite frankly, my Republicans and Democrats back in Illinois are just saying, we expect you guys to get things done. The election is over. You have another year before anybody faces the electorate. It's time for government to work. And Tulsi and I doing the Future Caucus is really about stop playing the 3-month and 6-month game, and let's talk long ball and what are some big solutions that we can wrap our arms around for the long-term health of the country.
All right, Congresswoman, this sounds good. I hear the words Congressional Future Caucus, and yet I'm pretty cynical. Why do you think this effort's going to work?
Because it has to. Obviously, what we've seen happening over the last few years especially is something that's not been working. What Aaron and I and a few others have
How many members are a part of this, by the way?
Right now there's 13 and many others who've expressed interest. But really what it's done is started a conversation and saying, how can we provide kind of a game changer to do things better so that we're not constantly trying to dig ourselves out of a hole or play defense, but really look at seeing how can we come up with policies and strategies that will take us into the next 20 years, the next 30 years, things that will make sure we are being responsible in governance, but also encouraging growth and innovation, both in government and in our economy.
You know, one thing we found in this NBC Esquire survey of the middle is that it was this pragmatism of just stop looking backwards. So I get the premise, and I know there's appeal out there in the country, but how do you put teeth to this? Congresswoman, I'll start with you, and then I want to hear from Congressman Schock.
Well, really, I mean, it's something that you guys talk about a lot, that the country talks about a lot, is the lack of relationships, the lack of trust, even within members of Congress, that enable the environment to be able to have these constructive conversations to say, what can we agree on and how can we come up with these substantive policies? And that's what Aaron and I and others have recognized. For Aaron, you know, we started talking and becoming friends through working out at the gym in the morning. And that turned into a recognition saying, hey, we actually have a lot in common. We want to be able to get results on things that we both care about.
Well, so this is the Congressional Gym Caucus. That's what we're going to talk about. Congressman Schock, the House doesn't work as well this way. The Senate, we know, you can see these bipartisan groups, and at least at the last minute, they do forge the compromises. They get what's done. That's what we're seeing with the Senate deal that's coming together. The House has never worked that way. How do you get the House Republican leadership to buy into your concept, to say, you know what, there should be bipartisan deals?
Well, a couple things. First of all, it hasn't worked that way recently because the House has functioned differently in the past decade. You know, I come from a district that once elected Bob Michael, who was the minority leader, and if you talk to guys of his generation that serve here, they'll tell you
Bob Michael
that
would be a Democrat today.
Well, I don't know about that. He was, you know what, though? Bob was a very conservative guy, but he was a pragmatic guy. And he, like many of in his generation, Tip O'Neill and the like, they spent a considerable amount of time here in Washington, D.C. Their constituents did not expect them to come back to their districts every week. And so D.C. functions differently. The Senate, when you're in a 6-year term, let's face it, the senators don't go back to their districts, and so they build more relationships here. Tulsi and I have had more bipartisan dinners with our colleagues since the government shut down because we've all been here. We've had nowhere to go. We've been stuck. But those conversations, to her point, have been constructive because when you have that environment where you can actually sit down without the lights and cameras, without the political posturing, and say, look, how far would you be willing to go on revenue? How far would you be willing to go on structural reforms to Social Security or Medicare and the like? You can actually have a constructive conversation. To your point, how do we get our leadership involved? The one thing that surprised me about being here in D.C. the last couple of years is that oftentimes those who hold the title of leader on both sides are the least likely to be a leader. They're the most likely to be watching their back, constantly worried about the extreme of their party with their knives out to get them. And sometimes it takes those of us in the political center, those of us who are not in the, quote, leadership positions, to put a bill, put proposals with 30 or 40 members behind it so it gives cover and it gives comfort to our leadership to finally embrace and move some of these ideas forward.
Congressman, what do you say to Democrats that say, why are you even bothering?
We hear that a lot.
I mean, because there is such look, all you do is go on Twitter. You know that the acrimony that's there, and it's this is dialogues are a minority. And that was one thing that we showed in our poll. But what do you tell them?
The people are demanding more, and the people deserve better, and they deserve a body in Congress that is unwilling to accept failure and that will continue to try to be creative to find these solutions. The sooner we can realize that neither side, no individual can operate within a vacuum and say it is my way or the highway and expect for any result other than what we've seen to occur is just not realistic. And I think that's where we have to continue to push forward, even if frustration is high, and have these candid conversations.
Two quick postmortem questions. What do you want the president to do once this deal is done? He's played a very backseat role. What do you want him to do going forward?
Once we get past this shutdown, once we get past the debt ceiling, I think there are a lot of issues that really need discussion. He's talked, a lot of people have talked about immigration reform and what that's going to do, not only for the issue of immigration, but for our economy and growth as a whole. There are many other issues we need to work on, but growing our economy is the most important.
Congressman Schock, are you satisfied with John Boehner as Speaker of the House?
Well, yeah, I think look, I would not want John Boehner's job. John Boehner has a very. So
you support? You want him to stay? You want him to stay? You don't want him to go anywhere?
Absolutely. I don't look, if for me to suggest that he would go would be for me to suggest that I have a better plan. It's easy to criticize the people on the top, but let me say this. I don't think we would be in the situation we're in today had our conference supported John Boehner's play calls. Had we supported what he was trying to do before the government shutdown, I think we wouldn't have gotten to this situation. So,
so what you're saying is he made a mistake listening to the right?
Well, it's not so much him listening as he's got to have 218 votes to move anything. And unlike when I was in the minority, Nancy Pelosi had an 80-seat majority. John Boehner's got a 20 or 30-seat majority. If 20 guys vote no, he can't move a bill. So he's got a tough job, and he's doing a good job given the circumstances.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Congressman Aaron Schock.
Thank you.
I love the idea. I'm just so beaten down by Washington, so we'll see. Fair enough. Well, when you're from Hawaii, you're always in a good mood. Thank you both. This just in.